Okay, Tina, you can start.
Mhm. So, dear colleagues, this is just to let you know that we will wait for another couple of minutes just for our presenter, Mrs. Zorica from Skopje, to be able to join us. She's experiencing some troubles connecting, so we'll give her another couple of minutes, and then we will start.
Hello, Tina.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hello, Zorica. We can
Rita,
hear
you're
you.
here. Okay, super, perfect. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
So with you also connecting, I think we are ready to start.
Yes.
And I would first of all like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us. My name is Tina, and together with my colleague Alexander, we are happy to be guiding and supporting you through this online learning session that is ahead of us. We are really happy to have you joining us, and that we will today open a discussion about the importance of ethics and how this topic really relates to an auditor's work, daily work, and his responsibility. Um, the plan for today is also to be discussing the question of what internal audit profession can also do to protect and enhance this ethical behavior. The fact that so many of you are joining us and this webinar attracted high interest also, in our view, shows the importance of this topic that we are addressing. With this webinar, we are also starting CEF's learning program within audit thematic area. And I would quickly use this opportunity also to thank our partners, Ministry of Finance of the Netherlands and the Slovenian Development Corporation through Ministry of Finance in Slovenia for their support in designing and delivering this online get-together. Before we dig into the content, I would just like to say that we are recording this webinar and that the final recording will be also available on the CEF's YouTube channel. I am here in the chat function, pasting the link so that you have it, where afterwards you will be able to pick up the recording and, if needed, share it also with other of your colleagues. So that for everyone to have also a good quality sound, we will mute everyone. But if you wish to say something and intervene, please do so by unmuting yourself, where you see this icon of the microphone on your screens. And also, you are invited to any time throughout this webinar to post a question in this chat function just by typing in the question and hitting the button everyone. Me and Alexander, we will be monitoring throughout this session, this chat, and we'll be picking up the questions for our presenters. Now we will share just a brief information how we will go about it content-wise. So firstly, we will listen to Ms. Zorica Božinowska-Lazarevska, and her presentation will touch on the internal auditor's moral courage, why it is important, what dangers internal auditors face in performing their work, and what can be done to help them act courageously. Zorica is a full professor and head of accounting and auditing department at the Faculty of Economics at the University of Cyril and Methodius in Skopje from the North Macedonia. And after Zorica, we will have an intervention by Marlies Irma from the Ministry of Finance in the Netherlands. Irma currently helps top managers within the central government in the Netherlands to reflect on the strategic risk, organizational development, and leadership issues so that they can make decisions informed and in connection to the major strategic risks and the signals from the environment. And she does so in her role as executive facilitator, trainer, coach, and also researcher. And during her contribution, Marlies will focus more on the practical aspects of the moral courage, and she will also share some of her own personal experience in this regard. As I mentioned, we do invite questions at any point. You please do, we encourage you to send them through the chat function, and we will allow the time to address these after both ladies finish their presentations. So with this, I give the words to Zorica, and we are very much looking forward to hearing what she will share with us.
Okay, thank you very much, Tina.
Tina, can you just stop sharing, please?
Yes, I will. Just Eva.
Okay, let me now give the presenter rights to Zorica. Oops, I gave it to wrong Zorica. Just to test. Okay, Zorica, now you should have presenter rights.
Yes, I'm trying now to connect my presentation. It doesn't work. How I can do that?
Just go to the third button.
Yes.
Left, share content.
In the share part.
Yeah, this is
yes, I'm going.
now appearing. You're waiting, starting to share content. Okay, now we can see it.
Okay, you can see presentation.
We see something on your screen, but
okay,
it's not now.
Now it's okay?
No.
No.
We see dark screen. Can you scroll or drag the document to the screen or something? Before I saw it, but now I don't.
What I have now my presentation, and I can see that presentation. I need to press stop sharing. Okay.
No, this. Go back to the screen, the previous screen. No. Ah. you opened it again. You don't need to open again because you're already joined.
Do you have my presentation? Maybe it's better to go with.
Yeah, I'll give Tina presenter rights, and then Tina will be able to. Can you just go to the top of the screen and click stop sharing? Just close this one that's open now. You can close this one.
I have a lot of different on my screen. I have
Zorita, I can see what you have on your screen right now, but can you see this window that you're now looking at? Just close it with X on the right side.
this one.
Yeah, or just put it down because no, just because you joined again. Yeah, you can close this one. You joined again. You're now inside webinar twice. You can leave
Meeting
this one.
room.
Yeah, just leave it like this. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Great.
Yes.
Now go to the top of the screen with your mouse.
Yes.
You see this drop down?
Yes.
No, not this. Go back to the presentation, to your presentation. Don't click this.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, now just move the mouse to the top of the screen. Actually to
Okay.
the top, and then you will see the buttons appear which say stop sharing.
I cannot find that button. I can see just my presentation.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, let me try to give Tina. Okay, I just gave Tina the rights and
Yes.
hopefully
Now
it
I.
stopped. It stopped? Okay, great.
Yes.
Tina, you can share it now.
Hai udite?
Yes, we can see it.
Can you
Okay,
see?
Zorita, Tina now has your presentation up, so we can begin, I guess.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for waiting me a little bit because there's some technical problem in my office with my computer. Hello everybody. It's my pleasure to have this opportunity, excellent, to be today with you and part of this webinar and to share with you my presentation under the topics Breaking the Silence, Internal Auditors, Moral Courage. At the beginning of this presentation, I'm going to move to another slide. Tina, can you? Okay. I will start my presentation with one opening quote by Michael Woodford, according to which if you know something is wrong and you choose to do nothing, you become complicit. That's very interesting quote, which shows some dimension about moral courage in general, but we are going to see later why it is important for the internal auditors. In this presentation, I used three very interesting documents, research papers published by the Institute of Internal Auditor. The first one is Ethics and Pressure, Balancing the Internal Audit, the Audit Profession. The second one is The Politics of Internal Audit. And the third one, Moral Courage and Internal Auditors. All these research papers are presented by the Institute, are published by the Institute of Internal Auditors. And we can see in 2015 the first one, 2016 the second one, and 2017 the third one. I will use some parts of this research reports during the presentation. What is the structure of presentation? In brief, very short, I will put accent on definition, what is ethics, what is moral compass and moral courage, what it means from the internal auditor's perspective, moral courage and moral compass, what means danger, fear, and courage, and how we can interact these three terms, especially when we are looking from the internal auditor's working environment, organizational political pressure, dangers, and internal auditors. And we are going to finish this presentation with one interesting article according to which internal auditor is suggesting to his colleagues if they seem something to say something. And finally, there is a conclusion of this presentation. First of all, I say we are going to see what is ethics in general. The term ethics derives from the ancient Greek ethikos, from ethos, meaning habit, customs. If we go further to find some more maybe clear definition, we can find many different, but I choose in my presentation to put accent on the one definition from Thomson Gale Encyclopedia, according to which ethics is the branch of philosophy that defines what is good for the individual and for the society and establishes the natural obligations of duties that people owe themselves and one another. Also, there is one in Merriam-Webster dictionary, in which there is a clear distinction that ethics is the discipline dealing with the good and the bad, with the moral duties and obligations. Further, if we go to the moral compass, we can see that the moral compass is, we can define as an inner sense, which distinguishes what is right from what is wrong, functioning as a guide for morally appropriate behavior. And also there are two different ways how to define this term moral compass. That is a personal belief system serving as a guide for morally appropriate behavior, or the last one, which is related after that with virtues of persons, individuals, and internal auditors. If you like to say that in more general, moral compass, we can explain with other words. It's something inside of us that tell us which direction we should go when we have to make decisions involving right and wrong. And I think this is very clear from this definition what is moral compass. Further, we are going to explain the next term, which is related with the moral courage. What is moral courage? It's the courage to take action for moral reasons despite the risk of adverse consequences. Or we can say that courage is required to take action when one has doubt or fear about the consequences. So we need some courage in our behavior when we are facing with some fear. And we can see that from the last part of this slide, in which, according to Kurt, nothing demands more courage and character than to be in opposition, open opposition to time and mainstream, to stand up and say aloud no. Now, one more slide related with some explanation what is moral courage, and we are going to move into the part of the presentation. Moral courage explains why an individual acts ethically when another who arrives at the same ethical decision point and at the same position does not. We can find a lot of similarities in the literature between the moral courage and heroism, and I put this slide just to show that there are a lot of differences, but also and similarities with the heroism. And the important difference between heroism and moral courage is that in the immediate situation, a hero can expect positive social consequences like admiration, applause, or something like that. But in contrast, in the immediate moral courage situation, a helper cannot expect positive outcomes, but rather negative social consequences like being insulted, excluded, or even prosecuted by one or more perpetrators. And again, we're going a little bit to see what that means, moral courage as a virtue. A little bit, we're going to connect this part with the antique philosophers. Plato centers most of his discussion related with courage in military settings. Aristotle's discussion of courage is also focused on the battle. He defines courage as something we reserve for those who face with the fear, and with the fear for death, with the interpretedness, or something like that. I put this part in my presentation because we're going to see later that courage is very close related with the fear, and it is part of also observing from the antique philosophers. What is important that both Aristotle and Plato wrote about courage as a virtue, And Aristotle, all virtues, according to him, falls into two types of virtue of thoughts and virtue of character, or moral virtues. And the main distinction is that virtue of thoughts are developed throughout education, and moral virtues are developed throughout the habits. Courage is developed throughout the habits, so it's a part of the moral virtues. And in one part, it's very interesting what Aristotle said about this, that our character is built by doing the same things over and over again. If you constantly give honest answer, you will develop into an honest person. Just like a flute player, he's making this parallel with a flute player, becomes a good flute player throughout lots of practice. Therefore, repeating immoral behavior is a breeding ground for more immoral behavior. We learn to act courageously by practicing, by doing, and you become courageous by acting courageously, just like you learned to play the flute by playing it. So this is very interesting part from this last part, last document research report, Moral Courage and Internal Auditors. And one slide more related with I'm going to finish here. It is interesting because in this part of presentation, you can see that according to Aristotle, it's very important to find this golden mean when we are talking about courageous behavior. Aristotle believed that both excess and deficiency could be disastrous, and that is only the golden mean that can produce the good. And to illustrate his point, as an example, Aristotle writes, who shuns and fears everything, and ground becomes a coward, whereas man who knows no fear at all and goes to meet every danger becomes reckless. Courage, this is very important point, is neither fearing everything nor fearing nothing. These two extremes. And we are going to see later that sometimes in some problematic situation it's very difficult to find mean life. It depends on this. I specifically that he is courage who endures the right things for the right motive, in the right manner, and in the right time, and who displays confidence in a similar way. The important part from this last part of the sentence is that he recognized the right motives. So, according to he believes that only virtuous motives can produce virtue. So, therefore, an act is only courageous if it has a noble ends. So, we are now going to move to what it means from the internal auditor's perspective and what means moral compass. A moral compass for internal auditors is determined by their own values, norms, beliefs, and convictions. We can find moral compass in IPPF framework, in which moral compass is part of the code of ethics with 4 principles and 4 rules of conduct. So we can move further with IPPF, and we can see on IPPF, the previous one, yes, we can see in the IPPF that there is one part code of ethics, and the key source of moral compass for internal auditors, in fact, is this code of ethics. We can see that this is part of mandatory guidance. So the code of ethics has very interesting structure, 4 fundamental pillars: integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and competence. The same principle, the same rules. I'm not going to explain in deeper these 4 rules and principles because I believe that all of you are very familiar with the content of this code of ethics. So I'm going to move to another slide to see how we need to put this moral compass into the practice. To be effective, this moral compass, we need to put that compass into the practice, and what is necessary? It's necessary, first of all, the principles and rules that we identified. We realize that they are identified in the IPPF, are recognized and accepted as mandatory guidance. They are part of mandatory guidance in IPPF and are put into the practice. So now we are going to see what that means. To put moral compass into the practice is not always easy. The first, what we need to know is to be familiar with the content of the moral compass. That means to be familiar with the code of ethics. After that, we need to have a professional judgment, especially in the problematic situation, because in their working environment, internal auditors are facing a lot of dangers. So it's very important to see the decision and behavior is in the line with the requirements of the 4 principles and rules, or is not fully in compliance with these rules and principles. So that means how to put the moral compass into the practice, and in some situation, when we have some problematic situations, we need to have moral courage, because we know that moral courage bridges the gap between making judgment and acting on them. That means that moral courage is we need in this part when we have the knowledge of the compass, we realize in each situation what means from the rules and principle perspective how to behave, and in that situation, if it's necessary, we need to present more moral courage in our behavior. So, acting morally, we can conclude that it's more just than just recognizing the moral dimension of a problematic situation. That was the part of the judgment, and applying our moral compass to this situation to arrive at the right moral conclusion. Because, according to the last research report, and this is part from this research report, when people don't recognize or accept the moral implication of activities, their moral compass will not be activated. In extreme cases, this leads to an amoral universe, and in an amoral universe, notions like good and evil don't apply. So this is a world without ethics, without a moral compass. What in this last sentence we can see? We can see that unfortunately, we need to activate our moral compass. It's not activated all the time. And we can see that from the next slide, that in the document, Bandura introduced 8 strategies which we are using very often to enable ourselves to activate our moral compass. And in the last document, Moral Courage and Internal Auditors are very brief explained these 8 strategies different. I'm not going to explain in details because we are going to continue with this Moral Courage for Internal Auditors after that. So you can see that in this document, but they're very interesting strategy, and you can recognize a lot of situations in which as a person and as an individuals we can see that our moral compass is not activated, and we need to activate it. Moral courage is demonstrated by internal auditors acting according to their moral compass when faced with danger. That is why I said before that these terms, fear, dangers are very important. Moral courage starts with a moral compass. So we need a moral compass to show moral courage. And what is interesting with this Bandura's theory is that our moral compass is not, as I mentioned before, automatically activated. We need to activate it in some problematic situation. So now we can move to another slide, and we can see that dangers is the first feeling, and the dangers create the fear. Fear after that leads to courage and courageous behavior. Without fear, there is no courage. So it's very close relation between the fear and courage. When we are talking about fear, we can say that that is essentially a useful emotion. It helps you stay alert, but also fear can freeze you, leaving you unable to do what is needed. When we are talking about courage, we can say that fear is one of the major antitheses of courage. Courage is not the absence of the fear, but that is, we can say, courage is the triumph over fear. And according to Nelson Mandela, fearlessness is stupidity. Courage is not letting the fear defeat you. So, in the next slide, we can see that relation very clear. Importance of courage, we can see that increasing proportion to the amount of danger internal auditors are faced in performing their work. If there were no danger, moral courage will not be necessary. The successful practice of courageous behavior leads to a decrease in subjective fear, and finally to the state of fearlessness. And we can say when the people are behave courageously that fearlessness, courage grows in the fearlessness. So on the next slide, we can see the 4 sources of fear and 4 types of danger. This is very in brief on this slide, but you can find in these 3 documents more information. This is important because we know what fear the individuals and internal auditors are facing, what type, and how they will solve this problem and face this fear later with courageous behavior. The first type, maybe the main source of fear, is the major source of fear when we are facing some unknown things or uncertainty. And according to this Lipsus and Klassen authors, this is very often we can face fear when we are facing some situation in which we have a lot of uncertainty. The second source of fear is social exclusion. In our behavior, we like to be part of the group, in the school, in political parties, in the working environment, and sometimes we are afraid that maybe as a consequence of our behavior, we are going to be excluded. Also, the third type of fear shows that sometimes when we are making our decision between the good and bad behavior, we are also afraid that maybe not today, but later we are going to suffer as a consequence of our behavior. And also the last source of fear is loss of status. We are all afraid that maybe sometimes after our behavior we are going to lose our status in the job, in the company. So that is another source of fear. When we're talking about these ethics and pressure and fear, maybe another question is why this is related with internal auditors. In the first document, ethics and pressure, balancing the internal audit profession, we can see a very interesting study based on a survey completed by 14,580 respondents from 166 countries. And you can see on this slide there are a lot of arrows, blue, red, and gray, and they're presenting positive, negative, and neutral pressure which internal auditors are facing in their environment. We can see the difference between the internal auditor code of ethics and also the code of ethics of the company. In the personal values, we can see courage is one also very important part. So in this document, on the next slide, we can see, based on research, that the main source of the pressure for internal auditors lies in the organizational political pressure. So what is that organizational political pressure? We can define very short that is a situation in which individual in the leadership position exercise their authority to achieve a personal belief or to protect an organization by attempting to manipulate the internal audit activity or internal audit reports. So there are marked in this part major types of organizational political pressure. We can see that very clear on the next slide. So there are 4 categories of organizational political pressure. The first one, suppressing a finding or a report, restricting the scope of internal audit, directing internal audit to lower risk area, specifically to use the audit to discredit an auditee, and undermining the credibility of the internal audit function. So, very interesting part in the politics of internal audit in the second document is this part in which we can see 22 different examples of dangers which internal auditors are facing in their working environment. And we can see that this lack of support, tone at the top, many interesting types of pressure which internal auditors and danger are facing during their work. So if we go further, we can see that according to this research in document, when we are analyzing the results from this research, there are very interesting points. Pressure to change our audit findings. Here we can see that's a different part of the world, but I will pay attention on the last line, on the global average. So in the global average, we can see that 23 of respondents say that at least one they face this at least one they face with the pressure to change audit findings. 11% say that they prefer to not answer on this question. In total, 34% say that they are feeling the pressure to change on the audit findings, or they don't like to give answer, which is very interesting information. On the next slide, we can see where is the pressure, the highest pressure on internal auditors to change audit findings. The highest pressure is on the chief audit executive level. The lower pressure is on the staff. So again, very interesting information related with the pressure which internal auditors are facing. On the next slide, we can see the gender comparison. Interesting parts in which we can conclude that the male are more under the pressure to change audit findings compared to the female. On the other side, females say that they prefer to not answer on this question in high percentage compared to the male. And the last, which I consider is very interesting from this research report, is the slide in which we can see what are the consequences for the internal auditors if they're resisting pressure to change audit findings. And we can see that the highest percentage is exclusion from the meetings, loss of opportunities, budget cuts, and the other measures and the consequences. What is very interesting, and from this we can see slide and the previous, that the internal auditors are facing a lot of pressure during their work. So the next maybe question is how they need to deal with this pressure and how internal auditors are managing dangers in their working environment. There are several strategies in the last document explained in brief, moral courage in internal auditors. The first one is know yourself. That means internal auditors are very important to know they have enough courage to say the bad news to the appropriate level if there is a need. The second one, due diligence, know the organization. It's very important to know at which level you need to report this bad news, and when you have some courage to say that bad information. Develop the right skills. It's not just the competence important part, but also when we are talking about the right skills, that means how to communicate with the different level in the organization, especially when you would say you consider that you need to say something which is wrong doing by the other in the company. Recognize the critical situation. Very important part is to be familiar with the critical situation because in that critical situation you need to see how to behave, and it is in accordance with the rules and the principles of the Code of Ethics. Be prepared for the action. That means identify all this is the abbreviation of the 3 words ACT, in which we have short explanation, to know alternatives, to know all consequences from these alternatives, and to take action by choosing the best one. Prepare yourself. Emphasize shared objectives. Factor your friends and know audit charter and this strategy to be in accordance with audit charters. What are the personal traits that can help internal auditors to support this courageous action? We can see the first one is courage, willingness to report and risk their job. That was the first part, know yourself. You're ready to risk. And when we are talking about courage, it's very important to say we're not talking about the question of do everything or nothing. Sometimes we can show this courage with some small actions. Small courage in some situation is enough to say the bad news to the appropriate level. Strong ethical compass. We say that before with the Code of Ethics. Excellent communication skill. That was part of the strategy on previous slide. Professionalism, calmness, personal integrity, fair-minded. Everything is important for internal auditors as a personal trait to face the danger and to show courageous behavior. In the first document, Ethics and Pressure, there's some advice for internal auditors, what lessons they can learn based on this research. And I will say that in very short. The first one, know the culture of the organization, but understand that it can change. That was also mentioned before. It's very important to know the culture of the organization. Business acumen is required. Anticipate political pressure. We see that political pressure is present in the work of internal auditors, and facts are your friends. That means internal auditors need to have evidence, completed data, and to support their conclusion and their discussion with strong evidence and facts. Very interesting part when we are talking about courageous behavior, I find in this Richard Chambers article published in 2019, in which the title of the article is "If you see something, say something," in which he's sharing his experience as internal auditor with the colleagues. And I will try to read very fast these parts. There are two very interesting paragraphs, very close related with the topics of this webinar. Speaking up about observations that are not within the scope of our audits may demand kid gloves, not boxing gloves. When you find problems, how you point them out can determine whether you are seen as a helpful or as a know-it-all, tale. We know that a perception of internal auditor is that they need to be truth-teller. So this part is very interesting, his explanation. You don't have to show it from the rooftops each time you notice a minor issue. But if you see something wrong and you are an internal auditor, you need to say something. So in this part, there is no compromise to say or not to say. He's saying that it is important to say something, and you often need to say it quickly and carefully. You don't need to use an accusatory tone, and you don't need to assign blame. If you are on the audit team, alert your team leader, and after that he explains the different level on which, depending on your position, you need to send the message to the appropriate level. On the next slide, it is very interesting part in which the Richard is saying everything what was mentioned before, also in these three documents, based on which is my presentation. In the past few months, I have written and spoken about the risk that courage deficit present to our profession. That is his opinion that internal auditors are facing with a shortage of courage behavior, and they need to be more courageous in their behavior. We must constantly check our own moral compass to validate what we are acting ethically and courageously in executing our responsibility. When you observe something wrong, even if it isn't within the scope of your audit, you have an opportunity and an obligation to share needed information that can help your organization. Some people might view this as being a sniff. After that, he is explaining that maybe those who castigate someone as a sniff are angry at being caught in wrongdoing. He is explaining that a sniff simply in his organization and company means share needed information that can help. So he is advising to internal auditors to share needed information that can help and do not be afraid that they might be sniffed. What we can conclude from this presentation, this is very broad topics, and maybe in half an hour it's very difficult to say everything. But in conclusion, I choose several points from this presentation to point out. According to Aristotle, courage is the golden mean between the cowardice and recklessness. And where that golden mean lies depends on the specific circumstances. That means there is no one formula which can fit to all internal auditors. It is very important to see what is in that problematic situation and where to find this golden mean. Some of the pressure of internal auditors can arise simply because they are in the disagreement regarding the facts or the implication of the facts. In the second document, the politics of internal audit, this area is recognized as a gray area. So that is why in this document you can find all this type of dangers and how internal auditors need to face with this organizational political pressure. And doing what you believe is morally just in the face of danger requires moral courage. So it's very important issues is to have the moral courage. I will finish my presentation with one quote from the documents published from the Institute, the first one, Ethics and Pressure, in which at the end of the document we can find one conclusion in which we can see that no matter how well trained, every internal auditor must deal with the challenges to their judgment and to the core ethical values. How they handle those pressures determines the value of the profession. So it's very clear that the internal auditor needs to be on the line with ethical rules, and in some problematic situations, it is important to face the danger and show more courage in their behavior. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be happy to answer on your question later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zorica, for giving this detailed overview of what the moral courage is, moral competence, what does it mean for the work of the internal auditors, putting us into this context of this profession. Also pointing out to several studies and interesting research papers that our audience, I'm very much sure, will be very interested to pick up later on. With this said, I would again invite our audience to write and share any potential questions that they may have with regards to your presentation in our chat function. But with no further delay, I would give now the word to Marlies now to also tap into more practical side of these concepts that Zorica, you introduced us. Marlies, the word is all yours.
I will try to share my screen. Maybe Alexander can help me.
Hey, again, the third button from the left, the circle third button from the left, share content.
Circle from the bottom from the...
Yeah, you know the circular buttons that appear on the screen below? Just choose the one that's the third from the left.
Yes.
Yes, share content. And then choose your program.
Oh, sorry. It's not at the bottom on my. It's here. Yes. Share screen. And no, this is not the right one. Just a second. I have to do this. Yeah. Okay. It's coming. Share. Yes, super. So, thank you so much having the chance to share some experiences and also have some interaction with you on moral courage in practice. So, my experience comes from an operational audit point of view within the central government of the Netherlands. I'm a senior audit manager on organizational culture and behavior and all kind of organizational issues. Imagine you're in a room with the top manager, you're halfway your audit, and you have to share your findings up so far. And so this was me and my colleague, and I have been searching an image at the internet to show you what kind of situation I was in, well, my colleague and I were in. So I think this image was kind of our outlook in this room, because the manager, the top manager, was the director general of a ministry. He was not pleased at all with our findings up till then. And it was about some policy process on regulation of certain public-private money flows, so there was big money involved. And so he started raising his voice and started finger pointing at us, like you see in this picture. So, well, in our, how do you say, in this environment, the ministry, policymakers, and so on, this is very unusual behavior. So it's very unusual manners, because normally everyone stays polite, even if they disagree. So actually, we felt pretty intimidated by this behavior. And so he got angry and he didn't believe our findings at first. He started even calling somebody on the spot to verify what we had said. So it was pretty emotional. And so we left, and we had to think about what to do the next time. And my colleague even had another history with this man in a previous job as a policy advisor. And he was asked, in fact, to breach the regulation in a procurement process. And even his own manager, so his direct manager, warned him, please just do it, because otherwise it could have consequences for your career. So this was the backstory in the relationship, or in the situation with this top manager. So yeah, if you talk about danger, maybe, well, what kind of danger would there be? So I will talk about these kind of things and what kind of interventions you could do, building forth on the presentation of Professor Lazarevska. And later on in this presentation, I will share what we have done to handle this. And as Professor Lazarevska also pointed out, there is this gray area. Well, maybe there are more than 50 shades of gray. This is the headline of this week's newspaper. You see some also a picture of 75 years of liberation of Auschwitz. So that was this week. And just to translate the headline, there was sensitive information of the Inspectorate of Justice withheld from Parliament. So that's a sin in our political landscape. And also whistleblowers say there's censorship at the Ministry of Justice. So what has this to do with our central government's audit agency, audit organization? My colleagues had to research this process. So was there information withheld or not? So it was not about sensitive information of the audit service, but my colleagues had to do an audit on this process, whether it was not or not. So what is very interesting is that my colleagues had to do an audit on 3 topics. And after they had delivered an audit on the first topic, the top manager said, well, we know enough. So you don't need to audit the 2 other topics, about this inspectorate and the ministry. So is this kind of limiting the scope of the audit, or is it just normal? So is this already the gray area, or is this appropriate? So it's not so clear all the time. But in the newspaper was also some inside quotations, like we try to avoid sending the report to the parliament, things like that. And well, the reasons those given were there were privacy protection. So there were names of civil servants in the report. So they decided not to share the report. So there were justifications, but would they be enough? So there's a gray area. And I love this quote of Thomas, it's my actually, from 1928. And if man defines situations as real, it's real in its consequences. So if you perceive there's danger, you will act like there's danger. And maybe there is this interaction that maybe could have been avoided, or maybe not. You don't know. But if man defines situations as real, it's real in its consequences. People act according like it. So, and what would you do? In fact, there are three options when you see this breach of value and you feel this danger. In fact, they are very reasonable as human beings. So you could stay loyal. You could not say anything, or you just very little. You can choose for voicing your values, and there's another option. You can exit the situation and quit. And I've done that once in my career, and my first, well, it was not as an auditor, but as an academic researcher in an institute. And this was about agriculture and about sustainable agriculture. And after a while, I saw that two solutions were not possible to be discussed, like in this all this ecological challenge situation, like less animals and eat less meat. So that was 20 years ago, something like that, and now today it's different. And I thought, like, I cannot add value here if those solutions are not acceptable to research and stuff like that. So I have chosen to exit, myself once. I'm very curious, in your role as an auditor, do you recognize these options? And we have this poll to make this a little bit interactive. And yes, now we're going to the poll, and you can vote which options you have experience with.
You just need to open the poll for voting, Martin.
Yes. I need to. I don't know where to find it, Alexander.
It's the circular button with 3 dots inside, the one we went before, and then this button next to notes.
Yes.
For Dutch language, and then
yes.
on the right side you will see it, and just open the poll
yes.
on the bottom.
I got it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Now vote, guys.
Yes, votes, and just very quickly, so then we can see the results, and you can vote for more than one option.
We are getting votes in. A lot of votes.
Yes. Yes, we see getting votes in. And we see half of you have already voted. Yes, you're doing very well. Still votes coming in. So we'll see what your experience is. Are there still votes coming in? You can still vote. So loyalty, voice, or exit, there are 3 options to deal with difficult situations.
There's 29 finished, which is about 60%.
1/3 of you haven't voted yet.
There are 5 in progress, I guess, or 6. So
yes,
expect some more.
Yes. Okay. Do we still see some movements? I think
4 in progress or 3.
Yes. Okay, I see.
So it's up to you when you close it, Marlis.
Yes. Okay, I think we can close now. And where is this? Okay, yes. Okay, guys, we close. Some seconds. We wait till every answer is in. Just a few seconds. So thank you so much for voting. And we have a look at the results. And yes, and we see many of you, half of you have experience with voicing your concerns. Also, some of you have experience with staying loyal, and two persons have said, well, I have chosen the exit strategy. So, and as Professor Zorica Lazarevska already said, it depends on the situation. And sometimes, yeah, you can voice, and sometimes it depends on the reason, personal reasons, but also on the situation itself, how bad it is. You can stay loyal and, well, just let it be. So thank you so much, and you have so much experience with voicing as well. So later on, I will ask you some question about that as well. Thank you very much. So, moral courage. Yeah, that is, as we said, it's standing up for your core values and values of your profession and speak up. So giving voice to your values. And it's also after the decision-making process. So after the analysis, what's the right thing to do? At this point, you know what the right thing is, what the right thing to do is, but are you going to do it or not? And so it focuses on action, on doing something. What am I going to do? What am I going to say? To whom? In which order? And of course, how can I do this effectively? So part of the analysis of this step is looking at the circles of control, influence, and concern. So you might have this concern about the situation, but maybe it's outside your circle of influence, or even and also out of your circle of control. So these circles, this concept comes from Stephen Covey, and it helps to address the question: what can you do? What's inside your circle of control? What's accessible for you? How can you influence? And maybe via other persons you can expand, because that's the whole point of behind this concept. How can you expand your circle of control? How can you expand your circle of influence if you see something that's in your circle of control, in concern? So there are several interventions and also resources. So the same, you saw the papers, the 3 papers of the Institute of Internal Auditing. The third one of 2017 was written by some Dutch researchers, Dr. Edgar Karsing, and I know him as well from my organization. We have worked together as well on this topic, and he has made some list of encouraging resources. And first of all, it's your own credibility, how you are perceived as well by others. Second is very important, seek allies. Never do this alone. And also take small steps, and no big steps, but take small steps. In fact, that it's you can try things out and safer. And you can start in a modest way, like start asking questions before like sharing judgments or whatever. And also, he pointed out, understand the worries and fears of others. So about this top manager, this experience I shared at the beginning, he was at the end of his career. It was 1 year before his retirement. And in fact, he didn't want to retire with problems. He was very keen on leaving a legacy. and be proud at the end of his career. This is a person. Well, this is what we don't know it, of course, from himself, but between the lines, we understood this, and he couldn't. He didn't want any problem in the year before. Another step is think very carefully about whom you speak with and when. So it's also about timing and what kind of relationships do you have with who. As said before, in the other presentation, you can refer to the mission, vision, and goals of the organization, and also use the pragmatists, so the people who can understand, who see both sides, instead of fighting the opportunist only, so people who are on the other side of the dilemma. And as said before, are you ready to risk your job? Well, it's much easier if you have some money in your bank account, as Dr. Eckhart Karsing says, some fuck you money, excuse my language. So yeah, it's being a little bit more independent from your employer. So what kind of interventions to influence undesirable influence are there? So I would like to give some overview, and they are content-based and also more relationship-based. So I will go through them, and at the end I would like to ask you to share some more ideas about interventions. So first of all, based on content, you can start exchanging information in different ways. For instance, provide more detailed information. You can map out pros and cons of decisions that are made or going to be made. You can ask for explanations. Why is it important? Why do you do this? You can set up a meeting with the people involved and share ask these questions and share this information. And also, as said before, try to understand the other person. So ask for information, not only give, but also ask and to understand. Another set of content-based interventions are more in a rational way. I must say, if people are really set onto something, sometimes rational argumentation they're not so open to that, but of course you have to try. And you can point out a conflict with the goals, policies, and regulations, as my colleague did in this other situation with this top manager in this previous situation. You can point out the risks and consequences. You can point out the conflicts, with the procedures and processes, and you can bring other possibilities to the attention. What if you could do this, or and so on. So this is and rational argumentation. Oh, and convince people what the best thing is to do. So maybe I think this is the most difficult, convincing people if they're already set to something. So first you have to create some doubts before they're ready to think about something else. A third set of content-based interventions are stressing task responsibilities and competences, like point at the importance of staying in role and task allocation and who is responsible for what. Point at the conflict with norms and values, about this responsibility and stuff like that. Also point at crossing the lines of loyalty, like you share that the other one how to say it's push you to cross the lines on what you can do. Ask reflective questions. So that's also ask a question is a very important thing. So I have made a list of what kind of reflective questions you could ask. For instance, I mean, this is not, I mean, you can think of many other questions, but just to give an idea, what's important for the organization? What's important for you? What and why? And why do we think it's true? Why do you think it's important? So then you can uncover the convictions people have. So the thoughts about the situation, and maybe you can influence those causalities that people have in mind. Also, make the circle broader, wider. Who's mostly affected by this? Maybe they just think of their own interest or their own part of the organization, but this question can make them think about other stakeholders. What would other stakeholders think of this? What's the best or the worst scenario? What could happen if? How would this disrupt things? So people, you may ask, make people think about the consequences. How do we see the future? Are there other perspectives, solutions? So a lot of questions, and definitely there are absolutely more questions, but just to have some idea. The second set of interventions is seeking allies. So never worry alone is very important. So address these situations with questions like diary colleagues in other staff functions. Now, I think you will have experience with this. And also address it within the hierarchy if you can. And for instance, your own manager or his or her superior. The management team, well, I live in this, I work in this political administrative environment, so individual board members or the board by submitting a proposal, and then you need, of course, the hierarchy as well to submit a proposal. And you can address it. I don't know if you have those persons in your organization, but in our organizations in the Netherlands, we call it trust persons, so that you can talk with them confidentially about concerns you have, and they won't share that information any other. So you have someone to talk with. So coming back on my own personal story, what we did in the next meeting with this top manager, we didn't go there alone. We took our director with us, and so we addressed it in within the hierarchy, and we involved our own manager, the chief audit executive, and we went together to the meeting, which was a pretty strange meeting as well. But at least we felt way more safe than in the first meeting. So that was the end of that story. Yes, so the meeting looked a little bit like this. Yes. So what can you do? I look at the time. We still have time, I think. What kind of policy that is encouraging can you establish? We have this oath or pledge for good civil servantship, so everybody does that. Clear frameworks, of course, tone at the top, and in our case, the presence of trust persons. So these are a set of resources that helps. And what can you do yourself? What's very important, I think, is like we're doing here. And well, you can do it with your own colleagues. Discuss cases and learn from each other, because then you see you're not alone. You can voice your concerns, also the emotional side of the situation or your own experience, and you get experience how to see the situation, perceive, and maybe and discuss all the values. As said before, communication skills are very important. How you say something and on which tone is very important. And I can really recommend nonviolent communication. Marshall Rosenberg is a very well-known author on nonviolent communication, and yeah, it helped me a lot in my life, actually, work and life. So I can really recommend that. Also, and this is before any situation happens, improve communication between the boardroom and auditors for better mutual understanding of positions. So maybe you see something as a breach while they see it as part of the game, and they take that risk. And so, and why do they take that risk? So that helps a lot to understand each other's position. So you can set up meetings about this. So when the heat is on, you have already established a relationship and understanding, and you can exchange information and contact, and the relationship isn't in danger. And very important, a contract upfront. When there's some sensitive research, do it at the beginning of the audit. What can you expect? Foresee difficult situations and discuss how you would deal with it. And if you're appointed in a job, it helps at the beginning of your job to make this contract as well. So wrapping up, I think there's at least there's no good or bad. It depends on the situation. If you whether you voice your values and show moral courage, and maybe you don't like to be a lion or you'd rather be a fox. Well, either way, I think it's very important to keep questioning ourselves. What would I do before any situation of pressure happens, and because it helps us to reflect and be prepared in this on these questions of consciousness and morality. So thank you so much, and Tina, I give it back to you.
Yes, thank you, Marlies, for this. I received a couple of questions, and I would like to share that both of your presentations, so Marlies yours and Zorita yours, with your permission, we will be sharing them after with our audience. Also, your contact details, as some of our colleagues asked explicitly for this. In the meantime, I'm looking and reviewing the chat, and I see that there is one question that a colleague is wondering whether there are any major differences for moral courage between working in the public sector or in a private company. So in other words, in which setting would one need more moral courage?
That's a question for me?
I would leave either to answer it to you or Zorita, yes, or if you would like to share, both of you, your perspectives on this, because I presume there are different takes on it.
Yes. Well, I keep it short. I think, well, within the Dutch government, there are a lot of measures to protect people, like employees, either auditors or civil servants. So we have a lot of processes and people to go to. Nevertheless, because of the pressure of politics and media, it's sometimes difficult as well. Maybe not so much for us as audit organization, but in general. And this week I just people are careful. People are still careful, and it depends on the type of manager they have, whether they feel safe to share. I see people never do it alone, because whistleblowers, well, it's a difficult position. And this week I heard a story from, I don't have experience in the private sector myself, but I heard a story from somebody who was hired within the government, and he had this experience. He said, well, he was asked to set up a risk management process and system, and he had done that, and he said, well, now we need to work on the culture. that we are managing our risks in an appropriate way and stuff like that. But the board said, well, thank you, your job is done, and we don't need you to change our culture because we don't want to. And they parted ways in a very polite way, so no fuss, no judgment, but just a little bit of money, and he left the job. So, yeah, that's an experience from the private sector. So they solve things differently, just keep it quiet, no media, no attention. And it's different within the public sector.
Zorita, would you like to comment? Oh, we can't hear you, Zorita.
Hear me now? You can hear me now?
Perfect.
Okay, I will add something to Marlis. According to my experience, I was part of the audit committee more than 10 years in one very big bank in Macedonia, and it was part of international network. And I was surprised that internal auditors are very courageous to say the bad things. So maybe it depends on the organizational culture and pressure which is inside the company. And we realized that from these 3 reports that is very important part. What type of organizational culture exists in the company and how the people are going to report. And I can say, based on the information in my country from the internal auditors in public sector, maybe they're facing more problem to say the bad things because they're facing more managers with a higher political influence, maybe because of the subject of audit. It's more sensitive in their part of the work to say bad things very loudly, and that is why maybe they are feeling that pressure higher compared to the private sector. But that is my impression. Maybe this bank was not representative sampling, and maybe there are the other private sector companies in which the internal auditors cannot say loudly if something is wrong going and wrongdoing by the other people, but that was very positive experience. And also I realized in one comment on the presentation, internal auditor needs to be not just auditor but also philosopher. That was in the first slide of my presentation, and I like to put that part that ethics is branch of philosophy. So when we're talking about the ethics, danger, all these feelings, fear, moral courage, moral compass, that is very close related with the other part of behavior, not with the internal auditing standards and methodology and approach which internal auditors are using. So that is why maybe they need to have knowledge in this part, and also Marvis point out very important part how they need to, that was in my presentation very brief, how they need to communicate, what type of question, how they're trying to put the shoes of the others and to see how they're going to report and how it's going to be accepted by the higher authorities in the company. So I think they need a lot of skills how to report the bad things, internal auditors, not just to find the evidence and to have some very, maybe I can say, strict evidence about something which is not good in the company, but they need to find the appropriate way how to report that. So that is my experience. Maybe internal auditors in public sector will have more practical, from the practice, their perspective, how what is their perception of the moral courage. It's interesting to see what they're going to say. If Marlis have the second part of research, they're going to see.
Well, I think in our country in 2012, all the public, well, all the audit departments of these different ministries were merged together. So first we were 12 smaller audit departments. And now we are a big organization of over 600 employees. So it helps to grow our visibility, but also our influence as an audit organization. So they cannot ignore us. And so also in the hierarchy, we have a general director who is a top manager in the hierarchy. So our position has improved since then. So I know it can be different in other countries, but so this is a solution in the structure to improve your influence. But I can say this helps us a lot. Yeah.
Thank you for this, sharing this answer. Marlies, I think this question is for you. If you could repeat the name of the author on nonviolent communication that you explicitly referenced in your presentation.
Yes, can you type it in maybe? It's Marshall Rosenberg. Marshall is M-A-R.
Yeah.
S-H-A-L-L.
Okay.
And Rosenberg, R-O-S-E-N-B-E-R-G. Marshall Rosenberg. And if you just Google nonviolent communication, yes, excellent. You will find his books and trainings. There are trainings everywhere in the world if you want to train yourself in this kind of communication.
Thank you very much. Being also observant of the time, I would like to thank both of you, Zorica and Marlies, for your really comprehensive presentations, and appreciation doesn't come only from us. I am picking up words of appreciation also from our participants in the chat box. To them, I would like to thank them for taking time and joining us. And just before we finish this session, I would use this opportunity also to share with our audience where they can find more learning opportunities within this year at the CEF with us. They will be able to search following this link. So with this said, I wish everyone a very nice day ahead. Thank you for taking again the time and joining us. And I'll say till next time. Ne?
Okay, thank you very much also.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Also, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much for your attention.